Hi, STEAM team! How are you today? Welcome to episode 4 of Candy Science. Last week, we built a DNA model out of Twizzlers, gummies, and toothpicks. We learned about some of the basic functions of DNA, the things that it does, and we even uncovered a unique DNA code from the model that we built. We have an exciting day today for the last day of our Candy Science theme. So today, not only will we be checking up on our rock candy to see how that has gone, but also we will get to learn about soil layers while making a delicious dessert. This activity requires a few common snack foods, but feel free to get creative with it and use any of the items that you can find in your pantry. Okay, but before we get started for our activity today, let's take a look at our rock candy. Here are the ones that we made together on video 2 weeks ago, and maybe you have your own growing at home too. At this point, the rock candy has likely grown quite large crystals. If your rock candy has formed a layer of sugar crystals on top, surrounding the chopstick, you may need to carefully break this layer by tapping it with a spoon. Then remove your rock candy and admire those awesome crystals. Let any leftover solution drip off into the glass or jar, and it's ready to enjoy. Comment on this video to let me know what you think of how your rock candy turned out, or maybe you're still looking forward to doing this experiment and making one. Let me know below. Okay, now for today's activity, let's first talk about why we might want to learn about soil. What are some of the functions that soil has, or the important things that it does? I'm going to read some right here. First, soil allows plants to grow. It gives the plants nutrients, and it also helps them to have a place to anchor into with their roots in the ground so that they're able to grow. And plants are just so vital for our food supply. They provide us with crops like fruits, vegetables, nuts, seeds, grains, and legumes. So much of what we eat consists of. Second, soil gives many organisms a place to live. Everything from small animals to insects and other bugs, bacteria and fungi. There's many of them living in soil. Third, it plays a part in cycling nutrients like carbon and nitrogen. Fourth, it releases certain gases into the atmosphere, affecting the air that we breathe. And it even helps to filter and clean water as the water drains through the soil. And for some of us who get our drinking water from groundwater, from below the ground, this directly impacts the water that we drink. So you can see why soil is so super important. So for this activity, you will need one clear cup or glass. This will allow you to see the different soil layers as we add them. 2 to 3 large Oreo cookies, or several mini Oreos, as I'm using today. You could also use chocolate chip cookies or any of your favorite crunchy cookies that you have available to you. Next, a couple tablespoonfuls of chocolate chips and or butterscotch chips. I'm using a mixture of both, and really you can use any kind of baking chips that you have on hand that appeal to you. Then you will need 1 serving of chocolate pudding, a few gummy worms, a couple tablespoonfuls of shredded coconut, green food coloring, this is optional, and you could also use red, yellow, or orange food coloring if you would like. Then you'll also need a spoon, sticky notes or tape, and a pen for labeling. Step 1. Step 1 is to start with the basis of the soil, which is called bedrock. Bedrock is the solid mass of rock that lies below the rest of the softer soil layers. You could think of it as the outermost layer of the Earth's crust. Nothing is able to grow in bedrock itself, but it contributes to the formation of the rest of the soil. For this step, place 1 whole Oreo in the bottom of your glass, or if you're using mini Oreos like I am, then use 3 or 4 of them next to each other to represent this solid layer. Step 2 is to layer on what is called the parent material. Parent material is made up mostly of large rocks, but in smaller pieces than the bedrock. In fact, it is largely made up of bedrock that's been broken down through a process called weathering. Weathering can either happen physically or chemically. For example, physical weathering may happen through temperature changes causing expansion and contraction, like when rocks freeze in the winter and then maybe thaw as it gets warmer. And an example of chemical weathering is when an acidic solution trickles down through the rock. This could be something as simple as rainwater mixed with carbon dioxide, and this slowly eats away at or erodes the rock, breaking it down over time. So the parent material is what allows the rest of the soil above to form. To represent this layer, take your mixture of chocolate chips and butterscotch chips, or whichever other baking chips you've chosen to use, and place them on top of your bedrock. 3. The third layer of soil is called the subsoil. This layer is hidden down below the layer of soil that we might see when we're looking at the ground. But it's important because it's rich in minerals for the plants above. Trees and other plants will reach their roots down into the subsoil to be able to take in some of those minerals that will help them to grow. The subsoil is typically a reddish-brown color because it is made up of things like clay, iron, and some organic matter. Organic matter is broken down matter and waste products from plants, animals, and other organisms. So to represent this layer of soil, open up your chocolate pudding and spoon your chocolate pudding over top of the parent material, aka your chocolate chip mixture. You can then use a spoon to smooth it out nicely and let it sink down into the cracks. Step 4. This layer is called the topsoil because it's above the subsoil. Sub meaning below and top above. This is the soil we may be used to seeing in a garden or just under the grass. Topsoil is rich in nutrients, and this is why we find an abundance of life living here. For example, we find plants growing, as this is where seeds germinate or begin to sprout and grow. And we find creatures like worms and other bugs, fungi, like mushrooms, and bacteria. For this step, you'll want to take a couple larger cookies or several smaller ones and place them in a Ziploc bag or some kind of bag that you can seal. Then you can use your hands or the back of a spoon and start to crush up your cookies. Crush them up as small as you can. The Oreos represent this rich dark soil the best because of their dark color. So this is your topsoil. Open the bag and pour it on top of the pudding or subsoil. Then it's also time to add our worms, as this is the place where they would be liking to hang out. Take 3 or 4 gummy worms and place them partially into the topsoil so that they are sticking out of it. Step 5. Our last layer to add is the organic material, which is also called the humus layer. This is a small layer on the surface of the soil, and it is made up of things like leaves, pine needles, sticks, moss, and other decomposing plant and animal materials. For this one, place your shredded coconut in a bowl, and if you have some green food coloring available, add a couple of drops and mix it up with a spoon to make kind of a grassy green color. But if you'd like, you could also try coloring it red, orange, yellow, or brown to represent the layer of colored leaves that is on the ground in the fall time. Or you could choose to leave your shredded coconut as is and think of it as a covering of snow over the top layer of soil. Sprinkle the shredded coconut onto the gummy worms so that they are poking out of it. Step 6. Now it's time to label each of the soil layers. Take some little sticky notes if you have some, or some tape and a pen, and stick a label next to each layer that you've just created, as I'm doing here. Bedrock, parent material, subsoil, topsoil, and organic material or humus. All done! Take a picture of your finished project if you would like before diving in and enjoying this edible soil treat. Yum! Remix time! For a remix on this experiment, you could venture outside to get some real soil or dirt and try making what is called a sediment jar. To do this, scoop some soil into your jar, making it about halfway full, and then fill it all the way just about to the top with water. Put the lid on your jar tightly, and then shake it up until the mixture looks cloudy. Now set your jar down and observe and watch while the soil and the sediment starts to fall down. As the dirt settles, it will naturally separate itself into layers, very similar to the ones that we learned about today. For example, larger rocks and pebbles and gravel will sink to the bottom of the jar, kind of like the bedrock and parent material. Then sand, silt, and clay will form in layers in the middle of the jar. This is kind of like the subsoil and or topsoil. And finally, decaying matter, leaves, pine needles, and sticks will likely float near the top of the jar, similar once again to the topsoil and or the humus layer. Okay, we're going to finish off with a real-world connection. So as we mentioned earlier, soil is so vital to our food supply, meaning the food that all of us eat every day. Soil is what allows food crops to grow, like fruits, vegetables, grains, beans, and other legumes, and nuts and seeds. The healthier the soil is, the more that the crops can grow, and the more nutrients they will contain when we eat them, making us healthier too. So having good soil benefits all of us. So thinking about this, pick a couple of categories now of food crops that I just mentioned, and tell a friend or family member, or maybe write it down, what are some of your favorite things to eat from each category. So today we learned some reasons why soil is so important and about the 5 different layers that it can be organized into, also preparing our own delicious dessert. All right, S.T.E.A.M team, I have so much enjoyed sharing these 4 Candy Science activities with you over the past 4 weeks. And while this may be the last one for now, more S.T.E.A.M Team Tuesdays will be coming in the new year with new exciting themes. So stay tuned. Until then, S.T.E.A.M team, take care and keep exploring and experimenting. Bye for now.